Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call this public hearing to order. If everybody would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, this is the Lackawanna County 2026 preliminary budget hearing. We're going to have our Chief Financial Officer, Dave Bolzoni, go through a presentation that was put together on the, kind of the highlights of next year's budget. And then Commissioner Chermak and I will have comments on it and any questions from Mr. Bolzoni. And then we'll open it up to any public comment or public questions at the podium. Everybody will have 5 minutes, similar to how the commission meetings work. Okay? So we'll turn it over to Mr. Bolzoni to walk everybody through the 2026 preliminary budget. Dave?
Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. As Commissioner Chairman Gahn had pointed out, this is the unveiling of our 2026 preliminary budget. And a couple notes that I'd like to make at this point. I'd like to acknowledge Mary Jo Granahan, who's in the audience, who had done a lot of the detail work in order to actually produce the budget, and also for Kristen O'Malley and Pat McKenna, who took my presentation and turned it into something that was actually presentable. Mine would have been viewed much more differently, I think. So let's get started. As an introduction, we are looking at a $181 million operating budget, which importantly does not include a real estate tax millage adjustment. Now, normally we would conclude here because it doesn't include a real estate tax increase, but obviously I'm sure everyone in the audience has some interest in understanding what the details are behind this budget. The revenues that we use to enhance this preliminary budget are really divided into three different categories. So the construction of the budget resulted in a preliminary deficit, and in order to create balance, as is the case every year, we had gone through the departmental submissions and made a number of adjustments. And those are what are categorized as departmental line item adjustments. There's also a tax lien sale, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, as well as a health insurance refund that the county will be receiving in 2026 for activity that occurred in 2025. So importantly, the general fund real estate tax rate remains at 69.67 mils. The debt service fund tax rate remains at 15.99 mils. The library fund tax rate remains at 3.07 mils. And the culture and education fund tax rate remains at 1.25 mils. When we completed the first run at the budget, there was a deficit of $3.973 million. Now, to put that in context, I've been here for 3 years. That was the lowest preliminary budget deficit that we had seen since I've been here. And the first budget I had worked on was the 2023 budget. And that had an $8 million preliminary budget deficit. And as everyone here is well aware, that deficit only increased in subsequent years. So the starting deficit was $3,973,245. After going through a number of departmental adjustments, and we'll highlight a couple of them for you, that subtracted from that number $880,337. We are also looking at completing a tax lien sale of $2 million in 2026, and we expect, again, based on utilization in our health plan for this year, that we'll also receive a refund of $1.1 million, which results then in a surplus of $7,092. Importantly, the budget balances, which I think is really critical for all of us. Under departmental adjustments, to highlight a few of them, non-departmental revenues, there's indirect cost reimbursement where the general fund is reimbursed by other funds within the county for services that are rendered to those funds. That's a component of the non-departmental revenues. And there was a $150,000 addition to revenue, which is the result of adding more departments to that reimbursement list. Right now, there are several that reimburse the general fund, such as Youth and Family Services, as well as the Area Agency on Aging, Domestic Relations, and we're also looking at workforce development in 2026. That's important because it is a fairly important revenue source for the general fund. We made some adjustments to the Clerk of Judicial Records, and that would be the Judicial Records revenue line item. It was a $75,000 adjustment. It was really based on trend lines. So we noticed that revenue increased from $731,000 in 2021 to $1.2 million in 2024, 66%. So when we subtracted out the pandemic years, there was still an increase in from 2023 to 2024 of 11.8%. So it really allowed us to create an adjustment for 2026 that would allow that line item to exceed 1.2 million. So it's really based on a lot of analytics and trend lines that are evaluated in order to construct these figures within the budget. On the expense side, in revenue and finance and professional services, we brought in consultants to assist us in a number of areas, such as audit preparation. And as we're getting better at doing some of these things, the number of hours that would be placed into assisting the county would be reduced, and therefore the cost that's associated with assisting the county would go down. And we were looking at a $50,000 reduction in that line item. And then another revenue source within the prison is revenue from the U.S. Marshals Service. And the program is funded by federal reimbursement for the detention of federal prisoners. Over the past 3 years, annual reimbursements has averaged just over $6.6 million. And we had forecast an increase of about $50,000 to $6.348 million, which was $50,000 over what was budgeted by the prison. So it's important to note that we're really reviewing each one of these line items in order to craft the budget as correctly as we can. Now on to the adjustments. The group health refund. So Lackawanna County is a member of the Pennsylvania County's Health Insurance Purchasing Cooperative, or PCHIP. The advantages of being in this 23-county cooperative is that you can achieve plan savings through administrative cost reduction, which is important. You can secure underwriting gains, superior risk protection, and group purchasing power. Those aren't foreign concepts when you're in a cooperative. And importantly, this is a cooperative exclusively for counties, and we do have 23 other peer counties that are in this cooperative. And it's performed very well for the county since the county has been a participant. A refund is generated when actual plan claims are based on less than projected usage. So Lackawanna County plan claims are expected to be about 93.6% of projections, resulting in a projected refund of $1.1 million. So if you're using the plan less, your cost is going to be less. So there's a projected premium that we get for 2025 of X number of dollars. And as you go through the year, if your utilization is less, then you're not going to use all of that premium. Some of it is going to be returned back to you. Correspondingly, if you use over 100% of the premium, it's going to cost you more, and then you're going to have to shore up the plan. Fortunately for us, For the period of time that I was here, there was a surplus generated from 2022, 2023. There was not a surplus in 2024, and we're expecting a fairly significant surplus in 2025. Excuse me for a minute. The tax lien sale is exclusively a cash flow instrument, and we've used it before. We used it in 2023, and I had used the same when I was with the City of Scranton. It accelerates the receipt of anticipated revenues through the sale of delinquent taxes, in this case 3 years and older. So what we did was we carved off a tranche of delinquent taxes and thought that we can accelerate cash flow by selling them. And in this case, we sold off taxes that were 3 years and older and kept the principal revenue generators in delinquent taxes, and that's years 1 and years 2. So as is noted in the presentation, total delinquent tax collections are budgeted at approximately $6.4 million plus penalties and interest. Penalties and interest are about $1.19 million. The revenue from delinquent tax sales averages approximately $650,000 annually. So you could take the $650,000 each year and add it to your budget. When you're in a situation where you have a deficit, it's very helpful if you could accelerate the collection of those receivables. Businesses do it all the time. Many government units across Pennsylvania do this as well, particularly school districts. In this case, we didn't want to sell all of the delinquent tax liens, again, because we're pulling in a pretty significant amount of money in years 1 and 2. But in order for us to be able to accelerate cash flow and create the figure that we're looking for, in this case $2 million, we thought it advantageous to sell off the tranche of tax liens that were 3 years and older. So, total general fund revenues are at $180,698,190. Total general fund expenditures at $180,691,098. It's important to note that total revenues, as reflected here in the general fund, include $1,804,971 in dedicated real estate taxes for the Education and Culture Fund. So they're deposited in the general fund, and then we transfer those dollars into the Education and Culture Fund. Total debt service fund revenues are projected at $24,973,931, and total debt service fund expenditures are at $23,720,227, and that includes a projected fund balance in the debt service fund of $1,260,175. Total library fund revenues are projected at $7,837,971, and total expenditures at $6,396,432, and that includes a fund balance in the library fund of $1,600,000. Keep in mind, these are dedicated real estate taxes. So when you look at the unveiling of the final budget, it gives you a breakdown of what those dedicated taxes are. Those taxes are collected. They're dedicated exclusively for those purposes: operating budget or general fund, taxes for debt service, a tax component for the library fund, and also the tax component for culture and education. I thought this would be really helpful, and Kristen did an excellent job of putting this together, to give you an indication of where our operating budget revenues actually come from. Now, you'll notice in the pie chart that non-departmental revenues is a really significant component of the operating budget. Within non-departmental revenues are real estate taxes. Real estate taxes are 93% of non-departmental revenues. And non-departmental revenues are 60.8% of total revenues. So the short of it is, you live and die by your real estate taxes. Also noteworthy, and you wouldn't think this would be the case, but the prison is also a fairly significant revenue generator, about $7.3 million annually, or 4% of the operating budget. And again, put that in context. Real estate tax revenues, 60.8% of total revenues. One of the next highest revenue generators, the prison, at $7.3 million, 4% of total revenues. So that just underlines how important it is to collect real estate taxes and how important real estate taxes are in actually funding the operating budget. Operating budget expenses at $180,691,098. Some of the categories here are fairly significant, not entirely surprising. Office of Youth and Family Services, the expenses are projected at about $41 million, which is almost 23% of the operating budget. Fairly significant. Keep in mind there is a reimbursement component to those expenses where we get funding from the state, anywhere from 50 to 80% of those expenses. Noteworthy also, the prison at $35 million is 19.3% of operating budget expenses. And under non-departmental expenses, the most significant piece of that is the pension contribution, which we have been increasing by $1.5 million annually in order to meet our expected contribution requirement. And so the budget for that contribution for 2026 is $9.4 million. All others is a catch-all category. That actually includes 34 different departments, so hence it is a fairly significant component of the pie chart. It's important to note as you look down the list, most of these services are required services. We're mandated to provide these services. There's a cost that comes with these services. It's not a responsibility that we have the ability to shirk. You're going to operate a prison. A prison is an expensive proposition, but you're required to provide that service, as you are with Office of Youth and Family Services. It's important for us to be able to provide those services as effectively as we can, as efficiently as we can, and as cost effectively as we can. But we have to provide the services, and they are expensive. So, the Lackawanna County real estate tax rate in total remains at 89.98 mils. Total general fund is 70.92 mils, which includes the 1.25 mils for culture and education. Debt service remains at 15.99 mils, and the library fund remains at 3.07 mils. Some takeaways on this process, and I made some notes and I just thought I'd share them with you. On the general fund budget, the $3.97 million opening budget deficit is the lowest since 2022. So before I started, my predecessor, who was an excellent CFO, Tom Durkin, in 2022 faced a $4 million preliminary budget deficit. When I walked in, the 2023 budget deficit was $8 million. That increased to $15 million, and then, as everyone is well aware, the disaster of having to face a $37 million preliminary budget deficit and attempting to solve that problem. There's two areas of note that impact the budget. What we noticed, which was really important for us, was a moderation of health insurance cost increases to maybe about 4.5%. That's unheard of at this point in time. Now, we have a meeting with our healthcare administrator coming up next week. We're going to confirm all of this, but if that holds true, we've been looking at 9–10% increases in healthcare year over year. So if we're looking at a more moderate increase, it's really important because we spend $30 million a year on healthcare. So any moderation of those costs is going to have a lot of value in constructing the general fund budget. The total assessed value increased by $12,232,902, resulting in a revenue addition of $1.2 million. That's helpful. It's certainly noteworthy, but in the context of a valuation of over $1 billion, it kind of pales in significance. But it's still important. It still adds, through organic growth, a little over $1 million to the budget. The areas of revenue enhancement, and we had talked about those. The tax lien sale is a cash flow instrument, which the county really should continue to use in rotation when the debt that's used to purchase those liens matures. And that's basically what we did. So there was a tax lien sale in 2023. That note was projected to mature in 2028 because of the total collections and the value of those collections. The note is actually maturing at the end of this year. So basically what we're doing is just rolling it again. And we'll probably use it again. It's a very good cash flow instrument, and it's helped the county quite a bit. And then the group health refunds, they're returning dollars to the general fund, which we're expending. So we're paying those premiums to the administrator for providing health care coverage. And those premiums are coming out of the general fund, coming out of the operating budget. So it only makes sense when you're getting a refund to put it back into the general fund, which is what we're doing in this case. Okay, in summary, and this would be before I get the hook by the commissioners for rambling on too much. I state it's a revenue problem, and what does that mean? So everyone in this room is very well aware that the operation of a county is an exercise in complexity. Lackawanna County has 65 different components divided into various departments and funds. Many deliver services that are required. Examples that I pointed out, such as the prison, youth and family services, the district attorney's office, they're all important services, and they're all important services which the county is incumbent to deliver. All of those services are provided for a reason. To deliver those services, you have to fund them. If you don't, you fail. It's as simple as that. A note to the employees relative to dedication. Employees who manage the various county departments are dedicated, hardworking individuals who each day try to accomplish as much as they can without elaborate budgets. I've worked quite a bit in the private sector and some in the public sector. I would match anybody I worked with in the public sector against anybody in the private sector. The biggest difference is people in the public sector work equally as hard, if not harder, paid a heck of a lot less. It's not just a giveaway. While we're delivering these services. The county tried to identify every opportunity to create efficiencies in cost and service delivery. We all know throwing money at a problem never solves it. As difficult a task as it portends, you need to look at each department, not only for its revenue-generating ability, if applicable, but for the ability to deliver services cost-effectively to the county residents, so that you can, with all honesty and credibility, state that if taxes need to increase, we're delivering services as cost-effectively as possible. And then finally, and this will conclude the presentation, incremental adjustments. As you've seen, the county runs its operation principally on real estate taxes. It doesn't take the expertise of a strategic management planning program report to understand that adjusting real estate taxes periodically is necessary. Otherwise, we have $8 million deficits, $15 million deficits, and then a $37 million budget deficit, and we don't want to go back to that, do we? And that concludes the presentation, and I thank everyone for listening.
Thanks, Dave. Just a couple comments. I want to thank you for putting this together, and Mary Jo Granahan, our budget director, for all your hard work. I also want to thank Commissioner Chermak for his hard work in working with me in putting this budget together. I want to emphasize that this budget is not only about 2026, but it's also about the long-term health of Lackawanna County's government. Consider the big picture that this budget reflects. Our goal is to achieve three things: financial stability, predictability, and sustainability, while maintaining crucial public services, often for our most vulnerable, youngest, and oldest residents, and ensuring that the county continues to play a major role in things like economic development, job creation, and improving the local quality of life. This budget, this 2026 preliminary budget, maintains our commitment while moving us steadfastly towards stability, sustainability, and predictability. I want to continue to focus on the future, but that does require a little bit of context regarding the past and the present, as our CFO had referenced. As you know, we were presented with an unfolding financial disaster upon taking office in January 2024. That included, among other things, $19 million in unpaid bills, a budget that purported to pay 13 months' worth of expenses with 12 months' worth of revenue, and a projected budget deficit of $37 million. One of the first things we did last year was identify the major issues and move very, very quickly to rectify them. We asked for outside independent financial expertise. PFM came in and we listened. They laid out an unvarnished assessment of the county's cash position and structural deficit, and then the steps necessary to put us on a sustainable path. Those recommendations were not easy, and they definitely were not popular. They required us to tighten our belts, freeze discretionary hiring and spending at key moments last year, and prioritize core services. But they also gave us a plan, a roadmap out of crisis that we have followed to date step by step. The fact today that we can present a balanced preliminary budget that does not raise taxes demonstrates that the hard work that we put in and the incredibly difficult decisions that we had to make are indeed moving the county government toward stability, predictability, and sustainability. This doesn't happen by accident. It's the product of a solid plan, honest accounting, and the hard work of county staff who tightened spending, found savings, and kept essential services up and running. Now, we're certainly not today celebrating complacency, but we are acknowledging progress, and the county now being on what I would consider stable ground. We have to remember, as Mr. Bolzoni pointed out, that this isn't just about revenue, although that is important. Structural reforms to our healthcare administration have resulted in next year's originally projected healthcare increase of 9%, which is a huge increase, being reduced by half to 4.5%. That's an enormous savings that also goes to the baseline so that future increases will be a percentage of a smaller number. Again, that doesn't happen by accident. You don't just wish that to happen or hope that it happens. It happens because of very difficult decisions that we had to make last year. Likewise, improved administration at the county prison has slashed overtime and has created a path to keep it under control. They are just a few examples of improved financial stewardship, but I also want to emphasize that we achieved those reforms without sacrificing county operations or progress. We have produced a truly extraordinary turnaround of the Office of Youth and Family Services, which was in disarray when this administration began back in 2024. It had a provisional state license, a massive case backlog, scores of vacant positions, and as a result, rock-bottom morale. Today, the full state license has been restored. The case backlog has been slashed from well over 1,000 to under 100, which, by the way, in and of itself is an unbelievable accomplishment. Dozens of crucial caseworker positions have been filled, and retention rates have improved dramatically. For example, last year when we took over, there were a dozen or so caseworkers, 12 or 13 caseworkers on staff. Today we have well over 50, and we are continuing to interview people every day. And we have launched the first of its kind Community Pathways project in the state of Pennsylvania to help vulnerable children and families get the help that they need to thrive before they become subject to the child welfare system. The county has partnered with the Chamber of Commerce to promote high-tech entrepreneurship. We have continued to provide business improvement grants to help small businesses grow and prosper. We have helped businesses and civic organizations to secure millions of dollars in state and federal grants to improve their facilities and operations. And our Department of Economic Development implemented a program that prevented evictions of 70 families from their apartments and won a statewide award, helping those tenants and their landlords deal with economic crisis. Our Parks Department has improved the physical condition of our parks while introducing an array of new programs and outdoor opportunities, including completing the beautiful North Pocono Trail in Elmhurst Township. And there's a lot more to come in 2026 and beyond. Over the past year, we've rebuilt and paved miles and miles of county roads that have been neglected for far too long. We've made major bridge repairs and replacements, ensuring our communities are safer and better connected. We've invested in modern equipment and smarter planning so that infrastructure work is done faster, cheaper, and built to last. There are still many challenges that lie ahead. The county is still in the early stages of recovery, and there will be more difficult but necessary decisions that have to be made. What we can be confident about today, though, is that we have stopped the free fall that our CFO had just talked about, a $37 million deficit that is very, very difficult to overcome without difficult decisions. We have stabilized the ship, and we can now plan forward instead of scrambling month to month. That matters for businesses who need predictability, for families who rely on public safety and human services, and for every taxpayer who expects honest stewardship of public dollars. The preliminary 2026 budget demonstrates that the long-term structural reforms that we have embraced are beginning to improve the county's finances and operations. And these results are a great incentive to continue those reforms to ensure, again, stability, predictability, and sustainability. And just in closing, as Dave Bolzoni mentioned during his presentation of the budget, you never, ever, ever want to be in a position that we were in last year, where you have a $37 million deficit, you have to have a double-digit tax increase and make some of the decisions that we had to make last year. I can honestly say that I was a councilman in Scranton in 2014 and Dave was the business administrator, when the bottom essentially was falling out. Well, that's where we were last year. We were as close to being bankrupt and insolvent as you could be, having to borrow over $10 million just to make it to the end of the year. We're in a better place today, but we're not out of the woods yet. This is going to be a long-term process. in order to get to a point where we have stability and predictability, as I mentioned throughout my speech today. So I'm very pleased where we're at today. We have a long way to go, but the decisions that we made and the progress that we made, it matters. It matters because of offices like Youth and Family Services. It matters because of departments and agencies like 911. We have to deliver those services. They are mandated by the state government. We have to provide them. We are not like a business where you can come in and just lay off hundreds of people and slash millions of dollars. There are about 66% of our employees are mandated people that we have to have here, and they all do very, very important work for different parts of society in Lackawanna County. So again, I want to thank Dave Bolzoni, thank Mary Jo Granahan, thank Commissioner Chermak, and all the people that are in this building and throughout this county who have worked on this and have helped turn the county around. Thank you. Commissioner Chermak?
Well, again, I'd like to also thank Mary Jo and Dave for all your hard work on this and for keeping me in the loop on everything as well. And the good thing, too, this is going to be a work in progress till we get to the final budget. So hopefully we can even identify some more savings, and, you know, maybe that $7,000 will grow a little bit more. So, you know, we're going to continue to work on that. And then we're going to continue even into next year, looking at our expenses and the revenues and expenses that are coming in and going out, and just keep an eye on that very closely. You know, the demands that get put on this county, especially at the prison and OIFS and then Health and Human Services, it grows exponentially every year. So it's very hard to keep up with sometimes. So again, we're going to be keeping a close eye on that. And we're going to keep promoting economic development here in Lackawanna County so that we can grow our economy and, you know, bring more tax revenue in that way. So to kind of ease the burden on the taxpayers here. So, you know, there's a lot that has been done. There's a lot that needs to be done, and we're going to continue to monitor this every single day. And again, it's a work in progress, but this is certainly a much better meeting than the one we had last year. So, you know, that's a good thing. But again, we're gonna move forward here and keep an eye on revenues, expenses, and departments and line items, and we're gonna watch everything. So stay tuned. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anybody from the public like to address the board and ask any questions?
Yes, Joan Hodawana, Scranton. I'm impressed. I mean, I'm really impressed. This is a well-conceived, well-articulated approach to getting us financially sound. And this health care, getting it down to 4.5%, if you can figure out the formula for that, you should sell it to the other 66 counties. Because I read a lot, and healthcare, as you said, 9 or 10% is the national average of the increases year after year. So however you did it, you should can it and sell it. Okay, that's a winning formula. Hopefully you can sustain that, maybe even get it down lower. Having said that, I've been told that there is a new sheriff in town. His name is Donald Trump. And he's made a lot of changes, and this is the first year of his 4-year term. And also, guess what? The government is shut down at the federal level, and we don't have a state budget. Those federal and state issues, I would like to know if they impacted your budget preparation and planning, and have they had any kind of negative impact on, you know, anticipated revenues and anticipated expenses? Because they scared the hell out of me. I don't know about you, but they scare me. That's one thing I would like to know about. And the second one is personnel costs tend to be the largest single factor in any government budget. Would you agree? Yes. Okay. You did a wonderful thing with healthcare, but another personnel cost that tends to, you know, go on is pensions. Am I right in assuming that most of the county's pension plans are defined contribution plans? Correct. Okay. And would there be any hope in the future, not necessarily 2026, but sometime in the future of transitioning to something like a 401k plan or some other approach, because the defined contribution plan is very, very expensive. And people are living into their hundreds. You know, they just won't die off. So, you know, that's a major component of hey, it is, don't laugh. Don't laugh, you all want to live to be 100. But that's a major component of personal costs. One is health care, and the other is pensions and other post-employment benefits, like insurance. Okay, so I just be interested in your assessment of those issues, you know, the federal government's changes and their shutdown, and the lack of a state budget and what that does to, you know, I'm sure you get certain things from the state. And
A lot from the state.
yeah, has that faucet been turned off? And when do you expect it to turn on? And how are you going to cope with it being turned off? I'd like your comments on those issues.
So I'll just, well, you go first and explain.
Really just 3 words, and I brought this up to both Boris and Jeff earlier. So looking at it in the context of 2025, October, okay. November, problem. December, absolute disaster if the state does not pass a budget. So the 2026 budget is important, but the other side of my brain is thinking about how do I get through the end of the year if the state doesn't pass a budget and the federal government remains shut down. So that is a work in progress, but it is certainly challenging. There are some things we've looked at that are relatively temporary in nature because there is no long-term solution to funding if the state doesn't pass a budget. A lot of our revenue, as has been pointed out, comes from the state. So we are looking at some solutions that would allow us to move forward, but I think once we got into December, if there's no state budget passed, it's not just a problem for us, it's a problem for every county in Pennsylvania.
Have you been prioritizing, you know, what you would have to deal with first and, you know, the drop dead things, and then you get down to the lower echelons?
Ad nauseum. Right.
And how about the pensions?
Hadn't really considered the 401k prospect. I think for us, importantly right now, we're trying to get to equilibrium with regard to our pension contribution that's actually required. I think you always want to look at alternatives, but our focus right now is to actually contribute what we're supposed to be contributing to the plan.
The other thing too, I think to take into account is that it's been bargained. You'd have to bargain that with
Eventually they'll come up for a new contract.
Right, yeah. So there's that part of it. And the second part I want to mention was, without getting into the politics on the state level or the federal level, because we'll go nowhere there, but the bureaucracy that always has a negative connotation to it. When I taught American government, I taught a whole unit on the bureaucracy. And the bureaucracy is important. And when that is under attack or that's not getting funded, that will trickle down in very negative ways on the county level. And it will affect, it's not just going to affect us here, it's going to affect a lot of people throughout the county that we serve. And if we don't have a state budget and we don't have a federal budget, then I'll use one example, one department as an example, like the Office of Youth and Family Services. There are so many crucial programs that get funded through the state government and through the federal government that if that money doesn't flow in, children get hurt, families get hurt, and that's what keeps us up at night. So we're doing everything in our power to continue to chug along here and operate. And we just had a meeting, Commissioner Chermak and I, with Dave Bolzoni and Brian Konslansky after the commissioners meeting on what we will do should this go into next year. So we are looking at every alternative and every option to make sure that we continue to keep the services operating and people get the programs and the help that they need.
And I'll add to that too, the 401K that's something that I've mentioned over the last few years that, eventually we're gonna have to look at doing something like that, have different ways for, retirement. So it is a good idea, it is definitely something that we will be looking into. And it would take a long time to implement it, but it's definitely worth looking at, so.
Would anyone else from the public like to address the board? Okay. We will be available for the press afterwards if anybody has any questions or wants to do interviews, and thank everybody for coming. And we do have, Brian, the next budget hearing is when, do you know? I can't remember off the top of my head.
I believe it is October 29th.
Okay. October 29th in Ransom Township, I believe? So the schedule will be posted online. We'll have, it's in the legal ads too. Okay, all right. Okay. Okay, all right, this public hearing is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.